Well, my name is Mary Helen Foster. I'm 88 years old. I was born in Cuero, Texas. My parents, when I was born in Cuero, both my parents were working. My dad was still working in a factory, cotton mill. There were cotton mills all over Texas at that time. And he wanted to do better than that. And so he and my mother talked about it and decided they would go to San Antonio where there was more opportunity to do more. My dad's name was Tillman Robert Thomas. He was younger when his father died and his mother moved to Cuero, where he had an older brother, an older sister, and his mother lived. And so he finished bringing in the crops and moved down there to Cuero with the younger sisters and his mother. He got his high school diploma, and it took about a year with studying all the time and then he became an electrician and went up with the company. And I don't know what his title was, but before he left, he was wearing a suit to work and a tie, and had some kind of an office job. And he started going out with one of the secretaries, and he thought that he was supposed to be a handsome man, and he thought he was really lady's gift, I guess, because he started going with women, and he needed to have his freedom. So he left us and went on his way. My mother grew up in a family of tenant farmers in East Texas. And now when the men all got grown, when the men grew up and left home, and the husband had left, and the sons had all left, the girls couldn't do the farming, and so they moved to town. But she met my father, and they got married, and so they moved to San Antonio, and I had one little brother at the time. He was 3 years younger than I, and then after we moved to San Antonio, we had another little brother. So I had 2 brothers younger. I think Jay was probably a year and a half or 2 years younger than Robert. We knew about the Depression and about the economy was so bad and all the people were out of work. When we would go anywhere and go through town, we'd see long lines of men down 2 or 3 blocks in downtown at a soup kitchen with their tin cup to get soup. Every day there was this long line of people. Men couldn't find work, and they would come to the house asking if they could just do the yard work or something. And Mother told them we didn't hire any help, but she always fixed a meal for them. So that was the time that my father left, and my mother then had us to take care of 3 children. She got a job as a waitress, but she hated that. She just couldn't do that. And she didn't like men, talking to her. She was not that kind. So she got a job at a mental hospital, and we had a little small apartment. I was 9 years old then. So that summer, I took care of my little brothers while she worked, because she left early in the morning and walked a mile to work and worked all day, 12 hours, and then she walked home. And it was dark when she left and dark when she came home. Mm-hmm. So I had the responsibility of seeing that my little brothers had lunch and breakfast and dinner. I was kind of growing up pretty early. Mm-hmm. But somehow it didn't bother me. I felt like it was just fun. We did pretty well, except that it was very hard. She made such a little bit of money because the hospital paid benefits to live on the hospital grounds, and their meals and your room and everything was included, and so the pay was not very much, and it just finally got to be too much. She was having so much trouble just buying food and paying rent, and we were going to the Baptist church at that time, and the minister, had talked with her and knew the situation, and so he finally persuaded her. He told her that he was, I think, on the board of the orphans home, the Protestant orphans home there. And he said it was a very nice place, we'd be very well taken care of, and that they did not put children up for adoption if they had one parent. And to me it was really fun because I didn't have a job. And it didn't bother me because, like I say, it was just almost like a vacation. Except that my little brother was only 18 months old. He was not 2. And he felt, the children were put in with other children their ages, and he was with the little toddlers. And he didn't see either his brother or me or his mother. Mother came once a week on Sunday and visited us, but he quit eating and he became, ill. And the doctor called my mother, and she said, he said that Jay would just probably die. He wouldn't eat, he wouldn't do anything. And there was nothing physically wrong except that he thought he had been thrown away. So the doctor asked Mother if I could come after school and play with him and feed him. And so I did. And, we just went outside and played when the weather was good, and they had a big toy room where we played when it was better. And he just got well because he knew, that he wasn't alone. Mm-hmm. But that was, the worst part was seeing this, but it turned out okay. My mother, she knew this man from the time she had known him and his wife. He was married to her cousin, and she had visited in their home, and then the wife left him for another man and left the daughter that was still in high school with him. The other daughter had married, and so Mother ran into him downtown because they remembered each other. And he'd ask her what she was doing. They talked, about their circumstances, and he took her to lunch and that. And so they started seeing one another. And so then they married after a few months, 6 months maybe. I was not at all happy about that. I told Mother, I said, we don't need a man in our family. That my brother nearest to me, was just 3 years younger, said to him, one day, about the second or third time he came out with her, he said, why don't you marry my mother and get me out of this place? And he said, well, I may just do that. I remember Franklin D. Roosevelt very well because I was a teenager when he was elected. For his third term, I was old enough to vote. That was my first vote. I can remember the song that the campaigners were singing was "Happy Days Are Here Again." I heard that he was coming to San Antonio. So I went to town and remember stood right, I got a spot right on the front of the curb, and because it was crowds and crowds of people to see the president. and he came riding very slowly. The Secret Service men were walking behind the car. It was an open convertible, and he had this long cigarette. You know, he used a holder for his cigarettes, and it was long, and he had this air, you know, about him. I just thought he was the most sophisticated person I'd ever seen. I'm sure he was. My best friend was working for her brother. One day she said, "Why don't we take a vacation?" I said, "Well, we can try." So she and I were going to go by ourselves to Corpus Christi on the train. It was an overnight trip. And then just before we were to go, she called me at work one day and she said, "Why don't we fly to Corpus?" Nobody flew in those days. I mean, not unless you had a business or something, you had to. I said, "Well, why would we do that?" She said, "Well, it would be a new adventure." One of the girls in the office, one day she came over to me and she said, "I have a friend from high school in Corpus Christi. He's a Navy pilot. He's not a boyfriend, he's just one of the students, and we keep in touch." And she said, "Would it be all right if I called and tell him that you're going to be in Corpus Christi?" I said, "Sure," you know, 19, 20 years old. But anyway, I called him and he said, "Well, my friend and I will come out and get you all for dinner, if that's okay." I said, "Sure." So they came and picked us up and took us out to the naval base for dinner at the Officers Club. And every night that week we were out there. And during the day, while we were on the beach, they'd fly over and make, you know, to show us that they knew where we were and, you know, show off. So, but, you know, it was so fraternal because I never heard of him again and he never heard from me or either. Or that was it. That week we just had a great time. They were getting ready to go overseas to war, you know. I just thought that sounded so fun because everybody around us were talking flying and making all these signs, you know, what they would been doing. And it just sounded so much fun. So when we came home, I told Caroline, "I think I'm going to take flying lessons." And she said, "Why would you do that? This new experience thing." I borrowed my dad's car and went out to the airport. This man was a flying instructor. I just went to the first place that had a sign, you know. He came down and I said, "I want you to take me up." He said, "No, I don't think you're the type." I said, "I don't know what the type is, but I'm going to learn to fly and you're going to teach me." And he said, "I just don't know about that, you know." I said, "Look, I have a job and I can pay you for my lessons and I can come out here on Saturday and you're going to give me a flight lesson." So he grunted and groaned, but anyway, he took my money. And every time he took me up, he would give me this old stuff. "You're just not the type for this. I think you better just give it up." He kept teaching me, but he wouldn't solo me. I expected to solo in 8 hours because that was kind of the normal, but he never did. So it was about 10 hours before he soloed. He told me, "A taxi up to the hangar, let me out. If you want to kill yourself, go ahead, but don't take me with you." That was a good send-off. So, you know, I just was so excited. I soloed, and he had me go around twice, and so we came back down. He had a girlfriend, and he had told her he was going to solo me. He hadn't told me. And his girlfriend came out to the hangar and brought me a bracelet with my name and the date on it. We girls all talk. We had to sit and wait for our turns, you know, and sometimes we wanted to take another half hour to wait another hour. And so we said one day, somebody said, "Why don't we organize a flying club, a women's flying club?" We weren't women, we didn't know how to fly, and we didn't know how to organize a club. So everybody said, oh, that'll be fun. But who's going to tell us how to do all this? And one of the girls said, well, we could ask Jacqueline Cochran. You may not know who she was. She was outside of Amelia Earhart. She was the most famous woman pilot in the United States. We thought she'd be happy to come and talk to us. So, and indeed she was. So she met us at Kelly Field. She flew her plane in, and we sat most of the night with her, talking to her in that hangar. And we didn't know at that time that she was organizing this group for training, military training. It was 43, 44 that I read a little piece in the paper, on the back part of the paper, that Miss Cochran was recruiting young women to take military training. Three of us in that little group made applications. 25,000, I think, young women applied. And we had to go and take a physical, and we had to take all kinds of aptitude tests and stuff. And I think the reason we were accepted out of all those women that were applying was because she knew us. And she recognized us. She was that kind of person. And she came once a month. They graduated a class. And she came for graduation. The women trained at Sweetwater. And she would be in the dining room when we would go in to eat. And as we passed her table, she'd call us by name and say, come tell me how you're doing. And then the worst thing that happened was one of the girls came to me very upset one evening. She said, named one of the girls, said her brother was just killed in action. So what did a 21-year-old know what to say? But that was what I had to do. But I just got my Bible and went over there. And she was crying, and I was crying, and all the girls were. And so she was Jewish. And so I opened the Bible to Psalms. And I said, would you like for me to read some Psalms for you? She said, oh yes, I would. And so we read the Psalms and we talked. And I told her I had 2 brothers in the Pacific in this war. And so it could happen to me any day, just the same as it happened to you. And so I can feel for you because I worry about my brothers. Anyway, years later, 20 years later, I guess, I went to a reunion. And she came over to me and she said, do you remember me? I didn't. I hadn't seen her, since. And I said, I'm sorry, but I don't. And she said, well, I remember you. She said, you came to me when my brother died. And so, I told her I was so glad I could. I didn't know anything to do, but she said that you did just right.
I can hear my Savior calling.
I prayed every day for my brothers and that. And I had a few tight spots too. I felt like that the Lord was with me. I never was really worried. When I was in a tough spot, I just did what I was trained to do. My belief is that if you're a Christian, God helps you. I've just finished reading a book on angels. You will need to read that, called No Fear. And I always believed that we had angels or somebody to help us. The Holy Spirit would help us when we were in a tight. The most exciting thing that happened when I was already graduated and working in maintenance test, one day as we were just barely off the ground and the tower called, he was flying pilot and I was flying co-pilot. He wasn't even listening to the radio. And I was doing the wheels and the flaps and the radio and stuff. And so I told him to look out, and he saw this fire and he went into hysterics. He had just come back from a bad experience. He forced landing down in enemy territory, in Nazi territory, Yugoslavia. And all he could say, I knew I was going to die in a fire. I always knew I was going to die in a fire. And I couldn't talk to him because I was talking to the tower was saying, are you going to go up and jump? Are you going to come in? I said, we're going to fly a normal pattern. That was all I could say. And then I just was, you've got two engines, and one goes out, you're like this, because the dead one's going to fall aside. So first thing you've got to do is to trim your airplane. As soon as you turn off that engine, with the fire, you hit the engine, turn it off, and hit the fire extinguisher for that engine at the same time. And then you start trimming the airplane so that it was straight and level. And so, I had all I could do, and then besides flying around the pattern to come in. But I just wasn't afraid for some reason. And I did get nervous when we got on the final approach, because I looked out ahead of me, and they had ambulances, fire trucks, the base patrol police, everybody out there were right on at the runway. And so I just pulled up right in front of them. And I knew the fire was out, because I'd put it out first. But they came running over, got the door open and said, out, out, out. So we just turned off the thing and got out. They had a car to take us. They didn't want that stay in that plane any longer. I said, the fire is out. They said, that's all right. We don't want you in there. So, but that evening, everybody, all the pilots gathered at the officers' club, and I guess all the other officers too, I don't know. So everybody had been listening on the radio, all the others. So they came over and they said, Chuck, we have been telling you that you're going to have a bad time one of these days flying with a girl. You're going to have a bad experience, and then you're going to have a hysterical girl besides the airplane. And what did you do? He said, I had hysterics, and the girl flew the airplane. We had no benefits when we left, no GI Bill. They just they notified the commanding officers to tell the girls to go home. And the commanding officer sent word to me to come to his office, and I did, and he gave me the news. And he was very nice, and he said, then if they ever do allow women to fly in this country, he said, I don't think that you'll be able to get a job soon, but we'll hope you can. But he said, you'll be ready, because you'll have what, they were flying the planes that we were flying. And he said he had a brother that worked for Pan Am in Florida. And he said, I will write him and tell him about how you've done here. And you can write and ask him, to take an application. And so they gave me my commercial license and multi-engine and instrument. But nobody would hire me. I was reading a flight magazine, and they were begging for pilots. So I wrote to every one of those. And the ones that answered me, and I think most of them did, said, we do need pilots, but we do not need women pilots. So I said, well, okay, they just lost a good pilot. I'll just go to school and do something else. So that's what I decided to do, go to college. Went to school. I met my husband. We were married 46 and a half years and had 5 children and other adventures. I waited till I was 26, actually 26 and a half. He was very interested in the family. We did Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and PTA, but we were very active in all the kids' stuff. I had 3 sons and 2 daughters. The oldest son was named for his dad, Paul, and he lives in East Texas, Northeast Texas, about 100 miles east of Dallas. And he has a lovely wife and 2 daughters, and they have children, husbands and children, and they're gone. They're all grown now. I had my second son is Bill. He's 17 months younger than Paul. My next child, Sally, was 17 months after Bill. She got her doctor's degree last year at UA. The next one was Stephen. He was 3 years younger than Sally, and he lives in Miami. Then my youngest child, 3 years younger than Stephen, they have the same birthday, and it's my birthday. All 3 of us have the same birthday. So that's my children. Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter's silver wings. Sunward I've climbed and joined the tumbling mirth of sun-split clouds and done 100 things you have never dreamed of. Wheeled and soared and swang high in the sunlit silence. Hovering there, I've chased the shouting wind along and flung my eager craft through footless halls of air. Up the long, delirious, burning blue, I've topped the windswept height with easy grace, where never lark nor even eagle flew. And while with silent, lifting mind, I've trod the high, untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touched the face of God.